Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast. You're probably seeing us on YouTube, but we're also on all the podcast stations. So find us wherever you listen or watch. I'm really excited today to introduce our guest, Irie Ewers. I'm probably not getting the last name right. I would have to practice it 12 times.
All good.
She is the director of corporate is Truce Global, but the product is NIM Tiles, and we'll let you share websites, contact information at the end. And they have a really unique product that is sustainable for building materials, and the process that they use to create them is very unique. So I'm really glad to have you on the podcast and anxious to hear more. Talk a little bit about the beginnings of the company, how it started, what the incentive was, motivation. You're in early stages of development. Tell us a little bit about how things got going.
Sure. So thank you so much for having us. We're very excited. Thank you, Mark. Well, right now, NIM Tiles is the launched vision of a product taking post-industrial waste, finding out ways on how to safely encapsulate that waste and actually transforming it into something that can be utilized again. So really an applied thinking on circular economy values and really kind of moving from circular into regenerative economy values. And Truce as a company has been around for the past, I want to say 6 years in research and development, specifically spearheaded by Joanna Arcelia, who is an amazing scientist, and her
Okay,
specialty is, okay, sorry.
let's back up a second.
Yeah.
Um, we actually the audio just dropped out.
Ah,
Um, so Truce Global. I wonder if no, your hair could not have gotten in the way of the.
maybe if I, is this better?
Yeah.
I can also speak up louder as well.
Okay. So Libby, cut this out,
Sure.
and
Back
let's
it up.
start back with Truce Global. Is
So Truce Global has been around for about the past 6 years in different iterations, most recently spearheaded by Dr. Joanna Arcelia, who is our lead scientist and the mastermind behind our patented formulation. So she and our founder, Neil Keane, who is more of the practical mastermind of taking theory, transforming it into actual application, started Truce Global to really figure out how to divert waste, honestly.
very nice, and then the tiles came
Mm-hmm.
after that as a an example of how to do this.
Yes, so I feel like especially in startup culture, you get into a realm and you are passionate about that specific realm, and then the nature of what you're doing, the nature of discovery, the nature of scientific inquiry actually leads you down a completely sometimes amazing pathway. So as a company, we were in R&D taking waste, trying to understand what the most viable and scalable market is to transform the waste into something viable. And currently, truly, there is no sustainable tile manufacturer, especially one in the United States. It is an industry that is untapped. It's actually a lot more industrialized than it needs to be. There is a huge room for artisan tile that is handmade, not at a premium. So that's kind of our biggest value add as a company and consumer facing brand is we are currently on par price wise with materials that are incredibly negative for the environment, such as cement. So that is kind of our dream is to disrupt the concrete industry in a way that is equitable and obviously competitive.
So were you experimenting with certain waste products that led you into tiles? And what were you experimenting with, and how did it lead you to tiles?
So from a business trajectory, it's been about balancing our input and output, how much physical waste can go into a product, and how can we move that product really quickly. So, for example, we could do bricks. We could do your normal clay-based red brick. The volume would be high, but the amount would be comparable to one of our wall tiles. So, if we're thinking about most bang for your buck, you actually better market, better margin in something decorative from a tile perspective than something that's just a simple physical brick. So we're always kind of balancing the use and the actual volume of the waste because ultimately we'd love to move as much waste as possible out of the landfills. That is our ultimate goal. That also has to be balanced with the sales trajectory of the market and market penetration. So that's kind of the exciting time we're in right now is did we make the correct decision? Is tile the way to go? Yeah.
So the overarching goal is using as much otherwise unusable waste
Mm-hmm.
and doing something to make it inert and useful.
Mm-hmm.
So that you use a brick example. Was there not enough waste that could go into a brick to make it worthwhile in terms of your mission?
It's more of a margin and business case for bricks actually. Elon Musk is also in that industry. He has the same brick machine that we do, and we don't want to compete against what he's doing. He's doing it well. No, but honestly, there's also a lot of artistry and vision associated with going into something that has a design to it. It's not solely based on market penetration and margins. It's saying, how are we disrupting the sustainable building industry? What are we adding ultimately? Is it something that can be regarded as artwork, as a tile, as a backsplash, as a kitchen counter could? Or is it something that's just traversed in an infrastructure way? So,
Okay.
NIM, in its current iteration, is really the artisan vision of equitable design. How do people come into a space and tactilely experience what sustainability is? When you look at a wall, you don't actually know what it's made out of. It could be glass, it could be post-industrial waste, but if you have a visceral experience, an emotive experience in that space, you're going to remember it. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that leads to ultimate behavior changes to say, maybe I'll actually start to use some waste-based tiles in my home. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
And also, I'm guessing that if you're using waste to create bricks, bricks
Hmm.
are a commodity, and so they're not going to sell for as much as a decorative tile. So you've
Yes,
got more revenue
sure,
coming. You
exactly.
well, and it would be harder to penetrate the market
Hmm.
just because there's so many manufacturers of bricks.
Yep, and they're
Yeah,
doing it great. They're doing it well.
and
Yeah.
cost effectively. Yeah,
Hmm.
Elon Musk is using the boring company
Yes.
tunnel
Hmm.
to
Line of
uh,
bricks.
as they're pulling the earth out,
Hmm.
um, and they have look in everybody look into the boring company. It's first of all the name is I think hilarious. If you're going to create a company and you're building tunnels to call it the boring company,
I
but
love it.
they've redesigned the tunneling so that usually I just watched a video on this recently. Typically, a tunnel would you dig it out, then you have to bring material in to build a wall around it, and after you take out the materials. So he's doing it all at the same time, boring, supporting the walls, and the material comes out along the side.
Hmm.
And at the end of the run, they're making bricks out of it.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so yeah, it's so
I
cool.
I think that model is similar. It's kind of redefining what our supply chains look like. So that in practice is that localization and ingenuity using what you have. Can you actually take I'm assuming it's some sort of clay-based material, compact it in the brick machine and actually create something usable through the process of digging it out. That's similar exactly to the ethos of what we're doing. We're just working with waste that is local to North Kentucky. We're not shipping it in, we're not getting it from China. We are staying as local as possible and saying, can we do something with it? And is there a market that we can sell to right here so that we're cutting down the emissions, the transport? Obviously, as we scale and grow, that's the goal, and we can offset. But at the onset, it's rethinking how you get started, because we are so used to these massive international supply chains. If we want an orange, it's at the supermarket. There's no concept of growing seasons anymore. It's just immediately readily available. And that's what sustainability in practice looks like. So I love what he's also doing in that regard. And the Boring Company's name. Yeah.
And for example, I'm in Florida, and
Mm-hmm.
there's probably not an orange to be found in any of the grocery stores that's not from California, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Shipping it
and the
in.
fruit and vegetables is so much higher than anywhere else, and
Yep.
the grapefruits and all that. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably Mexico and not even California.
Well, we,
Um,
we move we move goods more than we even move people across all of these borders, and we think everything is ours, and that we should have it just because it's there in front of us. Maybe, but what does a local impact-driven supply chain look like? It looks like supporting our local farmers, contributing to a community-supported agricultural system, which are the values that obviously your community is trying to impart in a very small sense as well, and that's why I reached out actually, is because I don't see a lot of people taking that idea very seriously. And it's pretty accessible when you have a crazy idea of how do we bring more people and thoughts and collision spaces and goods together, grow our own food, have these conversations, and then start to kind of connect out of these spaces as well. Ecosystems.
yep. So would your thought be that when you find other waste products that are local somewhere else,
Mhm.
that let's say if you're down in Florida and do something with the sand, or no, it wouldn't be sand because that's a
Yeah.
natural product. But anyway,
Hesitant.
waste,
Yeah.
waste from that would be local, and
Yeah.
then do the manufacturing and cut down on delivery. So,
Absolutely. In fact, that is the long-term goal. And we've been approached by a few different partners over the years, who have large waste and they don't know what to do with it. And why we ended up moving Truce Global from North Carolina, working with Duke Energy and taking fly ash to North Kentucky, is we had a supplier locally in stainless steel that said, here's our waste. We do not know what to do with it. How is this possible? Can you do something with it? So we moved the entire operation on site, moved our manufacturing facility there in North Kentucky, and we're looking to do the same, depending on the waste stream and how we can engineer it to again cut down on the supply chain. So we would love to replicate this and it be almost a replicating factory system, where we're moving to the raw material. We're not bringing the raw material in because labor, capital, even remote work, the design is pretty mobile. It's actually the raw material that is the hardest to find. And actually, it's more of that idea of target reduction from a waste perspective. If there's a waste stream, honestly, our next big idea is municipal waste. We want municipal waste. Let's take it. Let's biogasify it in a closed loop encapsulated system, and let's start to do something with it. So let's do it in Florida. But also at the same time, my interesting, kind of pushback to that is we also don't want to encourage more waste, especially from the consumer facing side of things. So I'm very hesitant to always kind of specify what kind of waste we are looking at, because we are really focused on that industry level for now. Those are manufacturing, supply chains that exist, and we don't have as much onus as a consumer to just throw away, because we're trying to get
right.
rid of that disposable culture. If we're just saying, oh, there's a solution and we're just going to put the waste elsewhere, that's not target reduction. That's not reducing
Mhm.
anything, and that's not reducing waste.
So let's talk about your current tile product. I think it's the
Mhm.
one that you flashed on the screen there, and um, show us different dimensions of it so we can see the. it's got depth.
Sure. So this is one of our newest faces. It's a star tile. It kind of looks like a shooting star. It is completely, I think this one is 85% post-industrial waste. So it looks and it feels, I don't know if it smells, but you would not know it's concrete. That's what the visual difference between the raw waste encapsulated in this process and concrete is negligible. And so from a consumer perspective, it's a nice product to interact with because it's similar to concrete. We know and love concrete. We know what it does. We know its capacity. This tile is a little bit more engineered than it needs to be as compared to concrete. So if we're thinking about, attributes that separate this product from a concrete tile visually, it's very similar. But this current tile has a compression strength of 4,000 psi, which is almost double what it needs to be to hang on a wall. I mean, you could stand on it. It's very hard, and that's due to the waste and the chemicals and the chemical composition of the streams that we're playing with and kind of tapping into. So visually, this is what it looks like. Chemically, it's not concrete.
And is it like concrete color gray?
Yeah, so the waste we use is a byproduct of stainless steel processing. It's pretty much the only waste that comes from stainless steel because stainless steel is an awesome, infinitely recyclable material. We high embodied carbon and energy because of the processing, but from a material perspective, the slag is a constant byproduct. I think it's exactly when the melting begins in the ore, it starts to separate from the impurities of the actual furnace. So it's the interaction between the stainless steel being melted in the furnace, leading to this waste that looks like it looks like a gray powder, almost like a cement. And it's just landfill. It's just going to the landfills in tons and tons and tons per day, depending on which facility you're working with. So that's our main waste.
Interesting. And then talk about the process of making the tiles.
Mm-hmm. That's the fun part. So right now, our process uses 5 different ingredients. We are in the process of disclosing what those are. We're just trying to figure out what's proprietary and what's not to make sure we maintain our IP as we move forward. But right now, it's similar to concrete in that we mix the materials together, but rather than hydrate, cement, aggregate, and bind it together using cement acts as the binder, and water actually hydrates the materials together like a paste. Our process chemically reacts together. So the final product is a completely new material than what you started with. You're adding your different chemical components, and it's actually causing a chemical reaction, not just a physical bond between the elements. So we don't actually have to add heat. We do not fire anything like a traditional ceramic, which is great for its properties, but it means that there's also a lot of energy required for the kilns, and you can offset that. You can, but again, it's source reduction on site. So once the tiles are poured into our hand-designed molds, they just sit and they just cure. There's no additional heat required. I mean, we could technically speed it up by using heat, but we just let them cure on site, and then we hand paint everything or hand seal everything there on site. So it's a very slow, it's almost a very kind of tactile process. There's a lot of hands, there's a lot of people touching the tiles, our laborers, and it's pretty simple. It's like baking a cake. Pour it in the molds and let it sit. So that's our process.
And you seal it when you pull them out of the mold.
Mm-hmm.
You seal it. Do you have to do any trimming of it, manual trimming of it?
The best case, no, because it depends on how we're pouring the material. This one, I will say, it has a little bit of a little lip right here. So sometimes we might have to just grind that off to make sure they're very flat and that they'll be flat on the wall. But the best case, when the pour is really good, you actually don't get any lip on the side. But it is a manual process, and these are handmade. They're mass produced, but they're handmade, so you're going to find those inconsistencies. But yes.
How long does it sit to cure? Is that the term like with concrete?
Cure. So right now we're curing about 2 batches a day. So that means it's about 4 hours to cure, which is a pretty long cure time, and that can be engineered down depending again how we tailor the chemical formulation. Right now we don't need to produce that many in a day. We might in a year when we have multi-square foot jobs, but to this day we're curing them twice or we're flipping the molds twice, and that is sufficient. Mhm.
Um, so you've got some nasty shit going in,
Yes.
to be delicate about it,
Yes.
and then coming out in these tiles.
Yes.
Um, how nasty is it anymore? How dangerous? Outgassing.
Yeah. So it almost has negligible off-gassing because it is a cementitious material. So the actual VOCs emitted are really negligible in the curing time. The only chemical that comes from the reaction is water vapor. So H2O is emitted, which is something that our employees have direct contact with. And in terms of the results, the tile could be it could be engineered to be a brick, and that brick could be outside, it could weather, and it will not seep or leach. So we do pass all of our TCLP tests, which means it's safe to put in your yard, basically. So it's almost inert at that point.
Is it safe to put inside? No
It
outgassing?
Yes, and we are currently in the process of getting our VOCs third-party verified by SCS. So in the next 8 weeks, we'll have the stamp of approval to say not only does it pass VOC testing, which is what we're all concerned with for indoor air quality, but it's been third-party verified. So we're very, very excited about that.
Good. Is it porous? We can't tell obviously from here. Is it very porous? Is it? Um, I know it's sealed,
Yeah.
uh, so not.
So the water absorption rate is lower than concrete. I don't actually have our exact water absorption rate off the top of my head. Again, when people are thinking about materials like this, they're kind of considering concrete, which is a physical hydration between the bonds, which leads to almost an inherent porosity, which is why we're concerned with freeze thaw, expansion, contraction. It's why buildings like what just happened in Florida, it's very serious. Water damage and exposure to elements is something we need to take extremely seriously for concrete. The material that we're producing, because it's a chemical reaction, it does not have that same porosity. There's not gaps in the material. It is chemically bound, which means it does not react to the elements in the same way, which is a huge, huge plus. Not necessarily for tile, if they're inside, but definitely as we look at exterior cladding and
Mhm.
weathering, and think about long-term viability of what that looks like.
Can you paint it, and will it stick, or is a better option to put some pigment in with your nasty shit and other
Yeah,
materials?
no, we're currently trying pigments because we've had that feedback of I want to be able to cut it and I want the cut to have a color that reflects the top. This is stuff that we internally just we unrolled a product and then we said absolutely market feedback. You are completely right. We're gonna test pigments. So we're working with pigments right now, and we currently are using a really low VOC paint. It's a silicate based paint. So actually, again, it's about chemically bonding to the material. It's Beak Mineral Paints, if anyone listening is interested, and they specialize in historic, sustainable building kind of restoration, protecting the facade of the brick or the concrete. So the paint will actually act as a little bit of a barrier, and then we seal that on top of it. So, our tiles currently are not recommended for wet shower installation just because we're still trying to understand what that long-term exposure of the paint will look like. Our material, totally fine for wet application, but yeah, we do paint them. And the paints are beautiful. They come in, I think there's 180 colors or something crazy. So a lot of choice for architects and designers.
So let me be clear. You can paint it just the surface, but you're experimenting with injecting
Mhm.
uh,
Pigments.
pigment. Okay.
Yes.
And
And
that's probably the better option.
mhm.
I guess if you have to cut them and have it or have exposed edges, if you're going solid wall is not so important, I guess.
Yes, it really is when we're thinking about, where we see our tile is communal experiences. Maybe it's under a bar, maybe it is, wrapping around something, and then you have an edge exposed. And as a manufacturer, as a new manufacturer, we definitely need to take that into consideration to make sure the product is being seen in its best light 360 degrees. Whatever is exposed needs to really show the best of the tile. So pigments will definitely be unrolled in the next few months. They're chemically compatible. It's one more material if you're thinking of supply chain sustainability. It's one more material that might be extracted depending on what the pigment is. So, there's always that cost benefit analysis of beauty and environmental impact. But from a choice and consumer perspective, pigments are a go. we are playing with them.
What about other designs for tiles? Obviously, if it's
Hmm.
an artisan product,
Hmm.
and you're going to have um, people saying, I want a deer head design.
Yeah.
Um, so it
Hmm.
really is just depends on the mold, right?
It totally depends on the mold, and that's what's kind of fun is we would love to do bespoke designs working directly with architects and designers. They have a beautiful way of seeing the world, and we would love to work with them to specialize a certain design or to create a custom tile for their projects. We have that ability in-house because we manage the full design scope of the tile. So we actually create the fusion 3D rendering of the mold. We assess it when it's inside the program. We start to prototype the molds in-house, and we actually make our molds in-house as well. So we have not outsourced anything, which gives us complete autonomy to really play. In fact, some fun tile designs that will probably be unrolling next year is integrating a living wall component, or maybe not necessarily something living, but air plants to create kind of woolly pocket tiles so that you can actually have your greenery embedded into the tiles, which is going to be really fun.
Yeah, that's a great look. Um,
Yeah.
what material do you use to make your molds?
Hmm.
Because, and I would imagine
Sure.
it can be easier to make because you're not pouring hot stuff.
Yeah.
So what are
So
they made of?
they're silicon based molds. So it's definitely not long term the most sustainable material, but from a durability, those molds are reused consistently. So a silicon mold is almost infinitely reused. So we still have some more molds prototyped from a year ago before we even knew we were launching these tiles, and they have withstood the test of time. We just clean them out almost like a cookie sheet every time. And when we want to add to our collection of molds, we just actually create the mix. We mix the silicone with the, I don't know what the chemical is, and then it actually creates the mold right in front of your eyes. It's a fun science experiment. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
Um, obviously, the mold that you show, the tile that you showed us is not ideal for floors. Um,
sure.
so talk a little bit about this material for flooring. Um, I would imagine it's going to be more similar to a concrete floor,
Hmm.
um, but and will you have to grout it? Will you have to, it'll hold the pigment, so that's good.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about
Hmm.
these places that go in, companies that go in the basement of somebody's home
Yeah,
and they make a really beautiful floor. So
I
what
love
are you guys
those.
thinking of for floor?
For a new manufacturer, we would love to do floors, and the tile itself is quite applicable to floors. There's a little bit of a higher liability coming off the bat, just associated with flooring. And because of this, we decided to launch and focus on wall tiles, especially decorative. It just is the lowest hanging fruit for us as a new manufacturer, and then start to really have serious conversations about flooring. So while we would love to do it currently, It's more on the books for probably the next 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you still have some liability with that heavy of a wall tile
Sure.
to make sure you secure it and those on the top don't weight down the others. Have you worked through some of those issues?
Yeah, the thing about wall tile is a lot of the issues that might occur may be installation issues, and therefore we as a new manufacturer don't necessarily have to cover those in our new product warranties. We do want to take that into consideration, but because we provide the raw material, the tile, and it really is on the installer, the fabricator, to properly install it. That question is not as relevant to floors, which we could have small cracks in the floor, we could have ridges in the floor, and all of those really fall back on us. So just a little bit more to consider in the design process versus the
Yeah,
install. But really good to think about, and it doesn't scare us. It just means there's a little more to work towards.
right. Um, it wouldn't be a very good PR move to have your wall come crashing down. So, and
No, we
you're,
don't want that. Yeah, and that actually has to do a lot with the bond strength. So which mortar, which adhesive we want to partner with and recommend from a manufacturing perspective, um, because that ultimately is what holds it to the substrate. So you have your wall, you have your mortar adhesive, then you have your tile, and then often you also have your grout if you have traditional grouted tiles. We're omitting the grout step, but we still have to really consider what that bond adhesive will look like with the pre-approved adhesive that we go with, which right now we're leaning more towards the veneer stone category of adhesives, which are really meant to hold a lot of that extra weight. Veneer stone is a thicker tile, so it
mm-hmm,
accommodates our material nicely.
mm-hmm. Um, so, if the goal is to reduce the amount of waste
Mm-hmm.
going into landfills or burying it or whatever, then you've got to be thinking about automation processes um, and not hand making all these tiles. So
Yeah,
something that's and really it doesn't sound like it would be that difficult of an automation challenge. You've got something squirting your material into the
yeah.
molds and they're moving down. But what are your thoughts about automation?
So it is a really easy process to automate, at my dismay as a social activist, but to the success of the company and especially long-term, large-scale projects, we can easily get one of the injection mold components where it hooks directly to our mixer. It's pressurized. It actually alleviates some of the burden of having to pick up a mix on an employee and actually fill the mix, because like we said, it's very handmade, it's very artisan now. And so it's pro and cons ultimately moving forward. It will alleviate that burden, and it will increase margins most likely because it decreases labor costs, but we're not necessarily employing someone that is hand pouring the molds from a job perspective and job growth, which is especially important as we consider our larger community impact in North Kentucky. It's something that we're balancing actually is, you know, cost of an employee versus automating with machines. And we don't take that decision lightly, especially as we consider, becoming a B corporation and really starting to standardize some of these practices and values. So, yeah,
Yeah, but if your larger goal is reducing the amount of waste
sure,
that that is disposed of, then
sure,
you're going to have greater impact that way. So
absolutely.
I've been curious to ask this question, but I keep getting distracted with the how
Good
to.
questions.
So talk about your interest and what led you to the company. You just leaked that you're social activist. Um, so, what's your background? What's your
Yeah.
interest? And how did you get hooked into this project?
So, my interest is not just an interest, it is most definitely a passion. increasing the amount of socially and environmentally responsible organizations is something that I feel very strongly about. And it almost becomes a question of what has the greatest impact in that regard. So my background is in sustainability. I have a Bachelor of Science from the New School, which is a very amazing and progressive university. Most people know Parsons, which has a beautiful design program. So I specialized, I created my own tract analyzing institutional accountability and impact. So that was everything from assessing ESG investment, what that looks like from an investment perspective when a company is saying they are performing up to certain standards. What are we looking at to evaluate on the investment side? And then on the flip side, what can a company do to actually increase social and environmental positive attributes? And oftentimes that comes through different third-party certification frameworks like B Corporation, like the Living Building Challenge, these sets of standards that start to create a language that fosters understanding of what impact means. Because if we're just looking at it from one lens, if you're just looking at the sustainability without the environmental justice component or the social justice component, you're going to find a completely different business model at the end of the day than something that might take all of those factors into consideration. So I have been working with the company. I've helped kind of found it under my stepdad, and this is really a family operated passion of transforming the entire industry, honestly, using what I went to school with and his practical expertise on the formulation side of things. That's my story.
Nice. And speaking of which, what part of your background connected with Thrive? You reached out to me to possibly partner on some things. So what
Mm-hmm.
were your, as a social activist,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on sustainability, what
Mm-hmm.
is it about Thrive that appealed or appeals to you?
So I actually will take this in a kind of different route. I think I found Thrive Co-Living energetically. It kind of found me. I was looking at permaculture biophilic initiatives, I believe, something related to permaculture and infrastructural design, and Thrive Co-Living came up immediately. The value and the emphasis on the socialization and tying that back into space is what interests me. So it's not siloing all of these different components of human existence and natural existence. It's saying, actually, how do we rethink life as a system, start to use what we have, such as taking box stores that already exist, create a new way to live without creating a lot of negative impact. So rainwater harvesting, wastewater reduction, integrating all of these components on site from a permaculture perspective was completely aligned. And I said, I need to reach out to this person, even if nothing comes of it, even if they do not like the tile, I'm passionate about the concept and the mission.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, no, let's move on. So, um, what are some of the waste materials that y'all are looking at in the future? And what
Hmm.
do there are probably not a lot of people that salivate over waste materials, but you guys probably do. Like you'll find a
Yeah.
waste material. You probably don't have a waste material that you don't like or love.
Yeah.
So,
We like
what are you
waste.
looking at now?
So first, I'd love to, if anyone else salivates over waste, there is a website called the Materials Marketplace, which is an initiative, I think, from Tennessee government. And it is a way to match providers or suppliers of waste to people like us that are seeking waste. So we're on there and we posted almost Craigslist style ads of, do you have a waste that you need someone to R&D and get rid of? And so far, we're really interested in rubber, so large scale tire, especially anything shredded from a product perspective, but also from a use perspective. That rubber is inert. I mean, you cannot really do much with the crushed rubber. We're looking at crushed porcelain. What happens, as gross as it sounds, what happens to toilets through C&D, high demolition. We're in the business of design and hopefully adding value to space. but that often comes at the consequence of taking something that already existed out. So any type of porcelain from construction demolition waste would be a beautiful waste stream for us. We're looking back into glass. Obviously, we do partner with Bardstown Bourbon right now. We take some of their post-consumer glass into our products. And then on the industrial side of things, you have, byproducts from pharmaceutical production, you have byproducts from automobile manufacturing. There is a lot of steel processing or factory-based processing, which leaves residues, it leaves liquids, and it leaves metals as well, which sometimes need to be completely processed again to create something safe. And sometimes they can be integrated. Also, post-agricultural waste, that is something that we would love to look into more, especially hemp byproduct. Hemp is a wonderful material in terms of its impact and ease to grow, and there is a little bit of waste associated with it. So from a building materials perspective, if we can help someone else think of what to do with their waste, and they transform the hemp into a more sustainable building material like insulation, hempcrete, that sounds like a win-win because we're using sustainable collaboration to ultimately reduce waste. So that was a lot. We would love to do a lot with waste, but right now our main focus is a certain post-industrial waste stream. Yeah.
What about, you're in Kentucky, in bourbon country? And I'm not really familiar with what they don't use, but in that fermentation process, there has to be some byproducts. Have you all looked into that?
Yeah, there might be. I know that Bardstown bourbon is actually highly efficient and that translates to highly sustainable in what's left over. I don't know if it has to do with reusing the cultures or not, and I don't want to speak to things that I don't know about, but I know that when we approached them about waste, they almost didn't have anything other than post-consumer waste from visitors and bottling waste from their bottling facility as well. But from an actual material perspective of the bourbon, um, that is a question that needs to be fully explored to really understand. So if anyone's in the industry,
yeah,
let's
because there's
connect. Yeah.
so many distilleries. I actually had a guest on yesterday. It won't be yesterday from the podcast perspective, but that I interviewed yesterday, who is a spirits consultant, used to work with Brown Foreman, and so I'll connect you.
That'd be great. Yeah, and I like those conversations because it means that we get to learn more about industries that we don't necessarily have fingers in. So I would love that.
And one other possibility, and I'm not sure you'd want to deal with them because they certainly are not sustainable, but in terms of farm waste, the chicken processing facilities, the hog process, there's just so much waste.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about volume, but then again, you've got some ethical issues, like the labor issue. Do you want to make it more palatable to encourage them to, we could expand and we could have 12,000 hogs in cages instead of 6,000 hogs.
It's so hard too because when you think about what is sustainability, when you start kind of unpacking what the question is, it leads to sometimes more problems. So overall carbon emissions versus what you're actually trying to potentially reduce or target. Animal agriculture, we're all quite aware, is an inherently quite intense industry, and by no means would we point a finger and say it's wrong, but from an emissions perspective, it's definitely it's really questionable. So it's something we would have to dive deeper and try to understand more to really find alignment, I think.
Yeah, because you really could be tripling the footprint.
Exactly, and that's why we're really proud to work with North American Stainless, because especially their Carrollton facility is, I think it's 98 or 99% recycled stainless steel. So not only are we taking a waste, we're taking a waste from an already recycled material. So from a mission perspective, that is exactly where we'd like to head. From an R&D perspective, we're open to a lot else. I think we would actually probably have more interest in municipal consumer-based waste from actual landfills than other industries that might not have the same sort of potential sustainability, if that makes sense. Yeah.
One more question about the
Mm-hmm.
steel. If they're recycling the stainless steel,
Mm-hmm.
do they still have the slag coming out, or does it get reduced each time it's recycled?
I don't know. I can't answer specifically, but I know that the slag is not just a byproduct of stainless steel. It's actually from the interaction with the furnace. So
Okay.
as far as the process goes, it's almost inevitable. The type of slag does differ depending on blast furnace or electric arc furnace, and that's where you get different chemical compositions in the slag. That slag
Okay.
is also processed afterwards, so it's processed in between us receiving it and them creating it. There's an intermediary step. So yeah, it's a good question.
Okay. So, what have I not asked you, or have you not shared that you'd like to about your company, your products, your goals? Let me give you just an open-ended invitation
Sure.
to share whatever you'd like.
Well, in terms of NIM tiles, we are really excited to reimagine the concept of walls as something that connects rather than divides. So we're looking at that from a design perspective. How do you start to spark conversation in the space, create memorable experiential design? And also from a social perspective, what does it mean to start to break down walls from a political and societal perspective? And how can we, as someone that produces art and sustainable materials, contribute to those missions? So missions like Thrive Co-Living, multi-generational living, that is a way that you're kind of metaphorically starting to break down walls that do exist, whether that's in our kind of human social perspective or not. So we make tile, but we also have a larger kind of social environmental mission as well, just on the tile front. That's separate from Truce Global and trying to completely eradicate waste. So,
Awesome. So, give us either both websites or one website. You may have one for the tile and one
yeah,
for Truce Global. Give us those
sure,
and other contact information.
sure. So nimtiles, nymtiles.com, and I will send you all of those details. And I am open to discussing artisan bespoke projects. I'd love to keep things local to the Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois area currently. But like your project in Florida, we're really excited to start to get our product out to the masses. So thank you so much for having this opportunity to discuss it as well.
Awesome. And we'll put that information in the show notes. Does Truce Global have a website?
Yes, it's just
TruceGlobal.com.
truceglobal.com. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And if you'd like to share your contact information, um, email,
sure.
then go ahead.
So mine's just Irie, Irie, at Truce Global, TruceGlobal.com. You can also find us at info@nimtiles.com. So if you have waste, hit me at Truce Global. And if you are interested in tile, info@nimtiles.
And you're
Multi-product.
especially interested in working with architects, designers, interior designers,
Mm-hmm.
um, builders.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Contractors, residential jobs as well. We'd love to work with any of the above, but especially if you're interested in equitable, sustainable design. That is who we want to support.
awesome. Well,
Yeah,
this has been tremendous. I've really enjoyed learning more about what you do,
thank
and
you.
I hope we can work together with our first, second, third Thrive community, and see how we can break down walls by building
Hmm.
walls.
Yes, I love that. Exactly. Let's break down walls by building walls. I think that's really nice. Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think I will definitely support the work in any way I can. And if we happen to align on tile, I'm very excited. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. So, everybody, um, there are plenty of ways to support the podcast. They're all in the show notes. So, look there and Thrive itself. We're looking for a modest amount of money. You can find that on the website at Thrive Co-Living Communities, plural, .org. Leave, don't spell out plural. Put the S on the end. .org.
.org.
Um, right, Thrive Co-Living Communities.org. Um, and if you have ideas for podcasts, as you, I think, are gathering, we've moved from just talking about the Thrive concept and the different aspects of it into doing what we will do when we have our physical facility, and that's bring in cool people that have great ideas, passions, business ideas. What else do we do? Expertise in a certain area. We're very eclectic in our interests. So if you know someone or you are someone who has something to share, especially around our shared values, communities.org. And keep listening on your favorite podcast station or um, YouTube to get the video. All right. Thanks, everybody. Irie, thank you so much.
Love it. We'll be
And
back.
been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/ Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.